Well, as you can see, everything worked out in my model and my approach. My edges are perfectly filleted and rounded, and the side surfaces are perfectly trimmed and are still there. Now it can happen maybe that with your version of Alias, this might not be the result. And that is definitely annoying. However, that is not the end of the world. And maybe this is a good example to demonstrate to you how to think about like how modeling works and not necessarily how Alias works. Because if one way doesn't work, maybe try to think about what could be a secondary way. A secondary way, that means maybe a different change in the steps. When do I apply what function, or a different tool combination, or a different surface tool or drawing tool. So as it turns out, the keyline curves can be tricky. So instead of using those keyline curves, I'm going now to use simple EP curves. So I go to my front, turn on the grid, and for example, then I go to curves, EP, and for example, just start drawing new lines. And I'm actually using my initial keyline curves as kind of like a blueprint. And with hitting snap all the time, so control key and click, I'm snapping my lines to the control points of those keyline curves. Okay, so that actually is pretty good. Now I can create maybe a circle, and I also press Control and click on this blue dot, so I can then position and scale my circle a little bit down to the specifications I need. Let's say maybe roughly there, and that circle I would like to only have 6 spans. Click accept. Okay. And I'm going to hide the surfaces. And I'm going to hide the profiles for a second. Okay, so that is what I have at the moment. I'm going to select all those lines and hide my CV and the hull because I don't really need them at the moment. There is sorry, there's one thing left, and for example I can copy and paste this ordering, and then I'm scaling it down so that it is getting close to the inner blue arc. Okay, that is good. And then at this point, I'm going to select those 2 lines. No, actually I can leave them. What I was looking for is to have 2 points on each curve, and ideally vertically or horizontally, because now I could go into a side view, go back to the EP curve, and use those actually as a snapping tool. So I snap with the control key pressed to each EP curve on the curve. This way my line is drawn directly and positioned on the curve. And I'm going to add another span, which means that this surface will now have a second edit point directly at the center or midpoint of this line. So I don't try to click this one and try to define that midpoint by hand. I simply click my first and my second point, and then with the span control, I subdivide basically that line, because that geometrically perfectly positions the DP point. And then I can select this point, go into the right view, go into move, and then, for example, start by pressing the middle mouse button, pushing this line out a little bit, so I could get kind of like an arc, kind of like this. Yeah, so this doesn't look too bad. Okay. So at this point, I basically have recreated my initial sketch, and I'm in the next movie going to show you how I'm going to create then the different surfaces.